Hello, MBA hopefuls, and welcome to MBA Waves. My name is Eric Lucrezia, your host for today, as always, joined by my co-host, Bara Sapir. How you doing, Bara?
I'm doing really good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. It's a hot day here in Paris, France, and I'm ready for vacation, but we plug along each week with MBA Waves anyway. How's it going in the Bay Area?
The Bay Area is super nice. I went for a walk with the dogs, and one of the dogs is upstairs, so Linda doesn't have to deal with hearing the barking the whole time, nor do our listeners and viewers. But no, it's beautiful out, and I'm grateful to be at my retreat since there's emergency alerts right all over the world right now with different health warnings. So I'm back at the retreat.
Nice. Well, speaking of Linda, today's guest is a fellow coach and admissions consultant who founded Accepted back in 1994, Linda Abraham. Hi, Linda. Welcome to
Hello.
MBA. Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So we met recently during the AGAC conference this spring. And for those of you who don't know AGAC, it's the premier association of admissions consultants worldwide, of which, Linda, you were a founding member. Would you mind, to start off, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your journey in the MBA industry?
Okay. It started with a lifelong love of biographies and people's stories. That started as a child. I still have quite a collection of biographies on my bookshelves. In college, I was asked to be a writing tutor. I did that, and I loved the work. I went on and I got an MBA because I didn't see how my love of the written word, writing, stories, etc., could be a profession. So I got an MBA. I worked. My husband and I started our family. In the early 1990s, we figured out that we needed to make some more money. And my husband was already working full time. So I had been working, but I had to either continue doing what I was doing, which I wasn't enjoying too much, or do something different. And I decided to return to the writing tutoring business. At the time, people were experimenting with online services. If you recall, AOL and Delphi and CompuServe. I don't know. Eric, you might be too young for that. I don't know.
I had AOL. That was one of my first. Yeah.
All right. So I started experimenting with that while advertising in the Daily Bruin because I live fairly close to UCLA, still do. And I started getting more and more inquiries about personal statements. I was just thinking about editing papers. Like writing centers do at different colleges. And this is a lot more fun than research papers. So I decided to focus on the writing associated with admissions and editing and focused on that. And around a couple of years later, the internet burst on the scenes. We put up our first website. I shouldn't say we, I should say I. At the time, it was just me. In 1996, it completely removed geographic barriers. And the business started to grow rather rapidly. Nice. We started hiring other consultants very quickly thereafter.
Linda, you and I met at the beginning of when I was a solopreneur. So I started doing that around, I want to say 2000. We met at the Coffee Bean in LA.
That's right. I remember that very clearly.
And we met, I think, because we were both on it was like a chat room or some kind of on Business Week. It was the only that I remember. It was the only place where different admissions folks really hung out and were presenting to other students. So
it was incredibly active.
Yes, it was.
It was the most active forum for MBA applicants, I think, ever, really.
Yeah.
I mean, GMAT Club and Beat the GMAT came along and they were good, but that was really the place to be in the early 2000s.
Yep. That's where we met. That's
right. Wow. I remember the Coffee Bean. I don't remember meeting you on the Business Week forums, but I do remember Coffee Bean.
That's the only place we could have met. Right? Like you said, that the barriers were no longer an issue, and you can meet people all over the country, really.
Right.
That were in this industry, and there were not many test prep people on there because there were not many test prep companies at the time.
True. There were the big guys, you know.
The big guys.
Right. The names we won't mention.
I love these origin stories. And you mentioned writing. So speaking, of writing, you recently published an article, one of several, one of many, about today's topic, right? So today we're focusing on why right now is actually a great time to apply for an MBA program, right? And I'd love to talk about that a bit more. Could you get us started with some initial thoughts about this article? What was going on in your mind that drove you to write it, and get into the nitty-gritty of it?
Okay. So I want to caveat what I'm about to say with, I am not urging anybody to submit a rushed, sloppy, suboptimal application. Okay. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about getting yourself ready so that you can apply quickly, but not just sending something in, some piece of garbage in. That will not help you at all. All right. So what prompted me to write that article, which I wrote in May? So at the time, and to a certain extent still today, if you walk down any street in the United States, you're going to see help wanted signs. Bara, I'm sure you see them wherever you are. I see them where I am. If I talk to my kids in other parts of the country, they also say there are staffing shortages, jobs wanted, rather help wanted signs everywhere. Labor unemployment is very low. The labor market is tight. However, if I also open up my paper, almost any paper, it will talk about economic bad news. There was a debate in the papers this week. Are we in a recession or aren't we yet in a recession? A few months ago, there were predictions of recession, like May when I wrote that article. Whether we are in a recession or technically are not in a recession, there's no question that growth in the United States economy has slowed dramatically, and in many other places in the world. I don't know, Eric, what you're seeing where you are. I'm sure, Bara, you will agree with what I'm reporting in terms of the press. Eric, do you see, are there signs of recession in Europe?
Oh yeah, I think it's a little bit ahead of the U.S. In terms of what we're seeing here. I think it's largely connected to the war in Ukraine, which is just around the corner, a couple hundred kilometers away, miles, as you will. And so that's directly affected us more. There's a lot of countries, especially in Eastern Europe. Germany is one of the largest countries in Europe population-wise that gets a huge majority of their energy from Russia. And so there's this sort of balancing act they're doing of trying to reduce how much they're purchasing to defund their war. At the same time, they need energy to survive. So there's that. And the other big thing is food. Grain. I mean, a lot of countries in the region, Eastern Europe, especially in the Middle East, like Lebanon, Egypt, they get upwards 75%, 80 to 100% of their grain supply from Ukraine and Russia. So it's a huge thing that we're seeing, and it's affects as we're a global economy. You move one thing, everything is affected, right? So it's already been starting here, and it's creeping over the Atlantic very quickly.
Exactly. So with recession almost always comes an increase in unemployment. And when unemployment numbers go up, application volume numbers also go up. And when application volume numbers go up, competition goes up. It becomes harder to get in. It becomes harder to get scholarships. All those things become more difficult. So my point when I wrote that article in May is get yourself ready to submit a great application, round 1, if at all possible, round 2, if not, but get ready to submit that great application, because I would anticipate that later in the application cycle, or certainly next year, application volume will increase, and so will the competition.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a nutshell explanation of it right there. I mean, like, to visualize it, you could say there's an inverse relationship between economic cycle or economic health and competition. Right.
Yeah, I sometimes joke that if you look at articles about MBA application volume, all they do is recycle the headlines from the previous cycle, the economic cycle, because it's the same. Is the MBA, when the economy was soaring, is the MBA dead? When the economy dies, whether like the recent COVID recession, look at all the people applying to business school, applying to grad school. There was an increase, dramatic increases in volume. At medical school, law school, business school, all had an increase in volume when COVID hit.
It seems like part of that increase is also people coming to terms with what they want to do with their lives, right? Like, they really think, like, I'm not happy in the job that I've been in, and COVID was a really great mirror for people to be able to consider what they want to do. And now, like you said, if you're considering a move, now is a good time to consider doing it, because there's less competition going in a year, like in next year's and the year after. There might be so many more applications if the big R actually really happens.
Right. And furthermore, if the recession does hit and lasts a couple of years, you could be graduating into an expanding economy with a nice new degree and new skills and kind of ready to roll.
Exactly. And now is no time like now that we need leadership, right? You were talking about at the AGAC conference that the deans were talking about, it's leadership school. I mean, I tell our students that all the time. I say, this is not just a numbers degree. This is really about where do you want to see change and how do you want to do that on a micro and a macro level. So, if you want to be a leader, my goodness, like now we really need leaders to really institute changes at all levels of our society.
What that makes me think of is, you mentioned as the world needs leaders, especially in face of so many major problems, whether it be, decisions like Roe v. Wade, or it be, shortages of grain or economic cycles and so forth. More and more, it's not a new concept. Let's say 10 to 15 years ago already, we've been talking about corporate social responsibility. And that is more and more of an important thing for a company to take a stance on important issues and having that impact. It's part of the sustainability model, not just like being green, but looking in the long term as a company. Are you having a positive impact on your surrounding communities where you say have a factory or something like that? Are you paying people equitably? Are you paying people fairly across the board in different categories of population? So yes, absolutely. Business schools, I think, are some of the first to be keenly aware of the importance of training good leaders. And that is what it's about. And a lot of MBAs, that's how they brand themselves, as a leadership program.
Right. Sure.
Yeah, good communicators, good negotiators. You were talking about the grain shortage, right? So you don't just need the farmers and the scientists, but you need and scientists to figure out, well, how are we going to do this if we are losing so much grain?
And you need
feed people. Pardon?
And you need logistics and supply chain management to get the grain to market.
Exactly. You need the business mind to think about how are we going to make it happen?
But not only that,
hopefully
like companies.
Hopefully, you don't need military to protect the boats. But anyways, that's a different topic.
That's part of it. That's a reality as well. But what I was saying is, like, people who are top leadership at companies that are going to collaborate with governments, cooperating with governments to make these things happen, who are going to be leaders to actually even make an offer to collaborate before the ask is even there, to create change that's going to help the whole community, nation, and world. So
right.
That said, how does an applicant, because this is an interesting topic, we're talking about like the need for leaders. How does an applicant demonstrate that he or she is already a great leader, or demonstrates potential to be an even better leader by applying for an MBA program?
Past behavior predicts future behavior. I remember D. Leopold, the former head of admissions at Harvard Business School, said many times, and for all I know, Chad Losey still says it, we want to develop leaders, not create them. Mm-hmm. So the best way to show that you have leadership potential is to have assumed leadership roles. And in those leadership roles, to have had impact. Several years ago, I met with a professor at Harvard Business School. I had a social connection and just arranged for an appointment with him. And in the course of, this was maybe 10 years ago, 12 years ago. In the course of the conversation, he asked me, what do you see as the common thread among the clients that you've had that got into Harvard Business School? And I thought for a minute and I said, leadership and impact. And he smiled and the conversation moved on. And I realized he's had a lot more Harvard students than I've had clients accepted to Harvard Business School. He'd been there for years at the time.
Right.
And I said to him before we were leaving, I said, I have one more question for you. I said, you asked me, what do I see as the common thread? What do you see as the common thread? Mm-hmm. And he said, well, I smiled at your answer because it's exactly what I would have said. Mm-hmm. So Harvard is clearly looking for people who have leadership experience and have had an impact on the world or on their organization or on society or on somebody else. And, I think applicants to Harvard need to show that.
Yeah, what you said is absolutely true. And I was just in there was an AGAC conference just prior to this where we had Blair, what's her last name? Blair Mannix, the director of admissions at Wharton. And that's exactly what she said. Past behavior is the best predictor of the future. So that's absolutely in alignment with all the top top ranked schools. So that's something you want to talk about in your show on your resume, your CV, and speak about in more detail in your essays and illustrate throughout your interview, of course. 100%.
And even your test results, right? Like the test results are, the schools look at them as a prediction of how you're going to perform.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. That also gets into the question of who should take the test and who shouldn't take the test.
Mm.
You know,
Right.
If you don't have that evidence that you can perform, the test is a good score is one great way to show that you can.
It's an important data point for sure.
Yeah.
Sure. You don't want to rush that either, right?
No.
You want to take a diagnostic, see how you do, and plan 2 or 3 months at least. You want to take the test twice, 2 or 3 times even. So I like what you said in the beginning, Linda. It's not about backing together an application and getting it off. I often when I think of things that I do, I often say done is better than perfect. But when you're applying to schools, it doesn't need to be perfect. It does need to be done. And it's somewhere in between.
It needs to be done. It needs to be excellent.
It needs to be excellent. It needs to really capture who you are as a candidate, who you've been as a leader, and what you want to do moving forward. You know, creating that biography, like you were talking about, right?
Right.
You know, creating your own story, and how is the school going to fit in? I would imagine.
It's
a subjective idea, but it needs to show the best version of yourself.
The best version, but not only the best version. It was I actually was on another StreamYard actually earlier this morning, and one of the questions I was asked was, "What about my personal brand? How do I develop my personal brand and present it?" I hear that's a big thing in admissions.
Yeah.
Well, you know, to be perfectly honest, I have a problem with all this personal brand stuff.
Let's hear it. I want to hear about this.
Okay. Bring it on, huh?
Yeah.
We are not cows having something stamped on our hide. Very simple. Okay. We are multidimensional human beings. And you don't want to come across as a one-trick pony or, you know, a logo or a slogan. That multidimensionality has to come through in your application. So to answer her question, I said, your personal brand is the sum total of your achievements and what you've done and accomplished in your life. That's your personal brand. And it should be multidimensional, and it should come through in the application. I don't know. What do you think about that? Maybe I'm going to get some pushback here.
No, I 100% agree. I was wondering if you're going to say something that was very different than what I think, but the way you frame it is exactly what I think. So we're on the same page. You know, it is not, like you said, a one-trick pony. We are, as humans, very multidimensional people, thinkers, interactors with society. And so to show the various facets of yourself in the best way possible is the way your application needs to be to shine. What were you going to say, Bara?
I was going to say that, you know, just to put a plug for both of you, is like, that's why you hire the professionals to help you really put a mirror up to who you are, because there could be things that you might have blind spots about yourself and blind spots about things that you've done, or even, you know, ways that the hero's journey, right, that you might not necessarily want to talk about, but in that challenge or adversarial situation, you really were shining. And so it really takes a coach like you, Linda, or Eric, to really bring out what the student really needs to bring out, because they might rely too heavy on a job role that they had in which they had a leadership position where they were able to accrue a lot of financial resources for a company, when actually there's other parts that really talk about their character and their ethics and their values, which a school is really going to look at when it comes to leadership. It's not just about numbers. So just a plug for your industry, for what you guys do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Bara. I mean, it's so hard to be objective about yourself, to really step outside of yourself and look at the whole picture of who you are and what things to focus on. When you have limited real estate, as you say in the industry, you know, in terms of word count on your essays, or if it's 1 or 2 page limit on your CV or resume, depending on what you want to call it, it's hard. And so, yeah, I mean, not to plug coaching too much, but like obviously you can watch a bunch of YouTube videos to learn how to play tennis. But if you want to, you know, play great, I mean, you never will do as well as if you had a coach. And I think I might have gotten that line from you, Bara, if I remember correctly. I didn't invent that, but yes. But Linda, before we ask a couple more questions, was there anything else in the article that you wanted to highlight? This article that you published a couple weeks ago, I guess.
No, I think I've covered the main points in it. Again, I think that with recession coming or here, application volume will ultimately increase, whether it's going to be I think it'll be round 2 in next year mostly, but my crystal ball's a little cloudy on that one. And I think that provided you, pardon me?
I'll stay in touch about that as I see what's going on here in Europe.
Okay, yeah, you can let me know how far off I was. I think that the last point I wanted to make was, let's say you listen to me. Okay, let's say listeners listen to me and they apply. They apply round 1, they apply round 2, they get into some great programs because application volume is still flat or down or only up a little bit because it hasn't really hit. They get into some great programs. You know what? Unemployment is still low. There's some great opportunities at work. Well, you got a choice. Yeah. You have a choice. You can go to the great program you got into, maybe with a scholarship, or you can decline it. Now, declining it might mean you don't get accepted to that school next time around, but you got a choice. You have options. You could request a deferral, which is admittedly hard to get, or you can go to the great school you got into, perhaps with money. But there's very little downside to applying as long as you're ready. I'm really not advocating just throwing in an application and wasting your money. I'm advocating still a thoughtful, purposeful approach to the application, and to the extent possible that you get it going. You move to get it in. This, again, possibly for some applicants, round 1. If not, then round 2.
If you don't throw your hat in the ring, you have no chance of getting in, right?
Exactly.
But, right? But if you do, at least you have the option, right? But I think there's talking a little bit about like, well, what happens if you get to that crossroads where you either want to defer or decline, and like how to approach the school. And I say, first of all, it's all about communication. It's all about presenting sound arguments, nothing hugely long and elaborate, but a kind of a short essay or something, a conversation that illustrates exactly why you're making this decision, which is not an easy one for sure. Demonstrating your passion for this school, for this program still, and because of circumstances in your local or global economy, that this is actually the path that you need to take. And speaking about that honestly, with a little bit of detail, I think is the way to go.
Right.
Well, the other thing is that if you're not completely sure, but you have a little seed of a desire, then just start with the test. The test is good for 5 years, right? The GRE or GMAT they're good for 5 years, and you can just go through it just methodically to see if now is not the exact right time. You could still start thinking about yourself and who you are and where you want to be. So just get some of the pieces in place. Like I always tell people, I love it when people come to me 2 years ahead of time and they're working on the GMAT. Like that's amazing because then we don't have as much pressure to get everything in within a 3-month period. They don't need to compete writing their essays with studying for the test. So, if you're not sure, but you're a maybe, or it's on your bucket list to do this, then just start with the test.
You're alluding to what we talked about last week on MBA Waves with Thomas, like why starting earlier is so important and, definitely yields more potential for success, starting earlier than you think.
Absolutely.
So like major takeaway from what you've been saying, Linda, is like, okay, looking at the economic cycle, you've seen this several times in a row. You saw this, I think in your article, I remember you referring to the global financial crisis in 2008-9, referring to 9/11 and perhaps something before.
Well, the dot-com bust, which was around 9/11, but yeah.
Right. Just before 9/11, right? The whole Y2K era. So you've seen the pattern, right? And I think there's like, experience and wisdom that comes along with those things. And that's why I was very excited to talk to you today. So the message is like, if you can pull off a complete and excellent application for either round 1 or round 2 in particular, go for it. But what if you're not? Like you've clearly said, like, and I 100% agree with you, so does Bara, submitting a subpar application just to get in there is not okay. Like, so what can applicants do? What can and should they do if they haven't previously thought about doing an MBA in 2023, and this conversation, this idea speaks to them. It's like, hang on, like maybe I should do this now. What are some things they can do? And I bring it up to both of you or all of us to answer that question, to be well positioned to do it successfully.
Well, I think And this is something where I'm sure, Eric, you do this kind of thing. We certainly at accepted.com do it. And Bara, you might on some, more limited way do it also with your students. You can seek an assessment. You can seek advice on how is it feasible to plan for a round 2 application? In other words, if you don't have enough experience, have a low GPA, haven't started the test, it's probably too much to plan on a round 2 application for this cycle. But you can start, work experience will kind of take care of itself with the passage of time. You have a low GPA, maybe consider HBS core, maybe start taking classes at a local community college or online so that you can get some recent A's, do mbamath.com, start preparing for the test, as Bara was saying, so that you can get that optimal score, that really, really great score. And then you'll be ready to roll round 1 of next cycle. Mm-hmm. If, however, let's say you had good grades as an undergrad, you had quant courses as an undergrad, but you haven't taken the test. Well, then maybe contact Bara and take your diagnostic and see, can I get it done? And can I get a good score in 8 weeks? Well, no. Today is August 2nd. 8 weeks would put you right around October 1. Then there's plenty of time to do some excellent applications for round 2. And you could do it. I have to tell you that when COVID hit in March 2020, as we all remember very well, and as I'm sure our listeners remember very well. But in March, there were no tests. I think sometime in April, it started coming out that there were online tests, both the GRE and the GMAT, maybe May. Barry, you would know this better than I would. But they started coming out as an option. Business schools were really worried that with the inability of internationals to get into the United States, because the consulates were all closed, their classes were not going to be full. And they extended the application cycle. They added rounds, they extended, they made all kinds of accommodations just to encourage late round applications.
GMAT waivers.
Now, GMAT waivers, exactly. That was, I think, the beginning really of kind of widespread test optionality and GMAT waivers. So at the time, we had several webinars on, how to deal with the situation. We hosted some webinars I remember for Columbia in particular, I think for Ross also. We had, I have my own podcast, Admission Straight Talk, where this was a major topic, how to respond to COVID. And a few people won free consultations with me. And normally I'm not a big fan of round 3 applications or late round applications. But in this case, I was saying to them, why don't you apply now? And they'd say, well, isn't it a bad time to apply? I said, well, this cycle is different. Maybe consider it. No, I don't think I'm going to do it. Okay, fine. A few days later, I'd get an email or a call back from the person. I thought what you said, or maybe they'd ask me on the call, why do you think I should do it? And I'd lay out the reasons. And they'd say, no, I don't think I will. A few days later, I'd get a call or an email. This happened several times. I decided to go ahead. They got into some fantastic programs. And they thanked me later. Most of them did end up working with us. Some of them didn't. But they thanked me later. They said, I would never have applied had I not talked to you. So my point to your listeners is, talk to us. In my case, and I'm not working individually with clients normally, but we have highly experienced staff. A 1-hour call is $360. What you have at stake is far more than $360.
Right.
So I don't know, Eric.
But 100%. I mean, like,
Bara, get going. Again, my main point is get moving. Do something.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that it's not going to come to you. You have to go to it. And if you have, even if now is not the exact right time, just start making steps towards it and talk to people, talk to alums, talk to the schools, talk to coaches, and figure out what you're going to do to progress this process. And the schools were responding to what was happening, and I mean, Absolutely. It was the whole like taking a test in your own home and being proctored was like radically new. Yeah, doing this remote piece, and there was all this. How are we going to deal with it? Well, now, like, this is now part of part of the testing apparatus for some testing. So, people had to respond to it, but just because there are waivers, like we said before, that doesn't mean you should just not take the test, because you get scholarships. Like there's reasons to take the test. Is going to demonstrate that you've got the ability to do it. So that you can handle business school work. So it's really just about taking the first step and taking initiative. And I say this all the time on this post: the way you do some things are the way you do all things, right? And so you want to be able to demonstrate that you're invested in the process.
Right.
Speaking of testing, you have also, for non-native English speakers, the TOEFL, the IELTS. And what's interesting is, following COVID, Duolingo now offers a test that is accepted at many schools. I'm not sure about the MBA space. I've not seen that yet, but in terms of undergraduate programs, like all the top schools you can think of in the States, and
interesting.
I think Canada as well. Yeah, Duolingo actually had been launching the program prior to COVID. So it's already more or less in place, and they just jumped on the opportunity and it's exploded. They got partnership, or let's say agreement, for the Duolingo test, and it mirrors the IELTS and the TOEFL. The score that a lot of schools want is like 120, but some are more lenient with 90. I know even community colleges, I've been hearing about accepting some at 45. What's interesting is community colleges have their own populations, and but what I was going to say is one thing that's actually very attractive to the schools is the part where you're speaking, you as the test taker are recorded, and the schools have the ability to watch that video. So it's almost like a video essay in a way. So you get a little bit more insight about the person, how they communicate, presence, confidence, all that kind of stuff. So Duolingo is another interesting option. We'll see if that starts opening up with MBA programs as well. And back to Linda's point about speaking about investing in the advice of an expert. I mean, we're talking about spending between $50,000 to $250,000, right? Depending on where you go, the city you live in, and so forth. When you take into account, your rent, transportation, all of these things, it's astronomical what you're going to spend. And you take into account all the networking events. In some of these top schools, like, you may be spending up to $500,000, which is incredible to think about. So dropping a couple $100 to spend a couple hours with somebody who really knows what they're doing and can give you an objective set of, objective feedback about what you should highlight, what you maybe should, not, is worth every penny, I think, really.
Agreed. So, again, get going. That's the one thing I hope comes through in today. Get moving, and then the path will become much clearer to you.
Bara, did you have any questions?
Your dogs have questions.
Yeah.
They're away. I don't know what's going on. Today is garbage day, and so they go like this one foster dog crazy. So I put him upstairs, but I'm sorry that you can also hear him.
That's okay. I'm teasing you. I'm teasing you.
What I will say is that it's a great time to foster and adopt. So that's another thing to do. Don't wait. Foster and adopt.
Dogs, okay.
Yeah.
So Bara, is there anything you want to ask?
No, I'm just really struck that we're in a very volatile, dynamic time right now, politically, socially, culturally. We have midterms coming up in the United States. And so, if you have the seed of wanting to be a leader and to initiate change and to go to business school, exactly what Linda said, get moving, get started, ask the questions.
One of my daughter's friends had a saying, I think it was on her notebook or something. They were in high school together. If you want to make an impression, you have to take a footstep.
Love that.
You have to move.
Yeah, you have to move.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's all for today then. Thank you so much, Linda, for joining us. It was a real pleasure to speak to you, to get to know you a little bit better, and happy to see you around in the MBA world. For those of you listening, thank you so much for joining us as always on MBA Waves. Don't forget to join us next week We have a series of great top-ranked business schools lined up, as well as topical episodes coming up soon in 2 weeks, talking about essays for round 1, getting those polished and perfect before you submit for September. So thank you so much, everyone who listened, and thank you, Linda.
Thank you,
Thank you very
Linda.
much for having me. Thank you, Bara. Thank you, Eric. It's been a pleasure.
All right, bye-bye.